A few years ago, at age 65, John had a heart attack that changed his life. It was such a blow that he struggled to recover for weeks, not knowing if he would ever be the same again. However, something happened. Instead of giving up, he decided to make radical changes to his body and mindset. Today, at 75, he runs marathons, something he never imagined when he left the hospital. If someone had told him that he would run again, he would have laughed. Yet here he is, proving that even after a heart attack, you can do the unthinkable. You may be wondering, how did he do it? His approach was neither extraordinary nor complicated, but rather a set of small, powerful habits that completely changed his life. If you want to reduce your risk of another heart attack, increase your energy, or achieve incredible goals, this video is for you. As we age, we often feel our bodies failing us little by little. Today, I want to show you how simple habits, like moving more or changing your diet, can have a huge impact on your health, happiness, and even longevity. In this video, we're going to learn how to survive a heart attack and emerge stronger than ever. I'm going to share the 7 secrets that help John run marathons after age 65, and that can change your life too. The first habit is probably the most important and makes the difference between a slow recovery and an impressive comeback. Habit number 1 is the importance of proper nutrition. After a heart attack, the heart needs more than just rest. It needs the right fuel. The first big change John made was completely overhauling his diet. Initially, he focused on eating foods that would repair his heart and strengthen his immune system. Over time, he realized that eating well helped not only his heart, but also his daily energy levels. The first step was eliminating processed foods and trans fats, and reducing the amount of sugar he consumed. He focused on eating more vegetables, fresh fruits, and lean proteins such as fish. Why? Because scientific studies have shown that diets rich in antioxidants, like those found in fruits and vegetables, directly impact heart recovery and reduce the risk of future heart attacks. John began preparing his meals with a new approach. He started incorporating whole grains, such as oats, brown rice, and quinoa. These grains gave him energy and helped lower his bad cholesterol. Initially, he thought this change would be difficult, but he began to notice how his body was responding positively over time. He started to feel more energetic and lost weight gradually and safely. Ultimately, he avoided another heart attack and became stronger and healthier. He ran marathons at age 70. The best part is that anyone can make this change in diet. You'd be surprised at the impact that eating right can have on improving circulation, reducing inflammation, and keeping your heart in top condition. Nutrition is just the first step. What happens once you've got your diet in place? John's next habit, one of the most surprising, has to do with something most people don't think is possible after a heart attack: exercise. Habit number 2 is the power of moderate exercise. The idea of starting to exercise after a heart attack can be scary, but here's the key. Moderate, controlled exercise is essential for strengthening the heart, improving circulation, and preventing future heart problems. John started out walking just a few minutes a day, but he did so intentionally and consistently. He knew he couldn't start running marathons right away, but he understood that something as simple as a daily walk would improve his cardiovascular health. As the weeks went by, he gradually increased the intensity and duration. Soon, he was not only walking but also jogging a little. The most important thing is that the body has an incredible ability to adapt. Although a heart attack may seem to limit our possibilities, regular exercise gives the heart the opportunity to heal and strengthen itself. Studies have shown that moderate exercise, such as walking or gently jogging, can improve cardiovascular function and reduce the likelihood of having another heart attack. The fascinating thing is that you don't have to be an athlete to benefit from exercise. You just have to be consistent and listen to your body. John didn't start running marathons right away. He started slowly and didn't push himself too hard. Over time, his body gave him clear signs that he could push a little harder. This is a key point: patience. Often, when we face a health challenge, we want immediate results. However, real change, the kind that lasts and enables you to fulfill dreams like running marathons after age 65, comes slowly, with small but steady steps. Now that we've covered the first 2 habits, think about this. John's story is more than just inspiration. It's living proof that you can overcome any challenge, even a heart attack. Most importantly, you can do it too. It doesn't matter how old you are or what difficulties you've faced. These changes are within everyone's reach. If you're wondering if you can do it, the answer is yes. Next, we're going to look at 5 other habits John adopted that allowed him to not only survive, but also thrive. The most surprising thing is that these habits are simple. They're simple yet powerful. Stay with us to learn more secrets that will help you live a longer, more active, and happier life. If you're ready to start this journey, subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next parts of this life-changing story. Now that you understand how John's first 2 habits transformed his life after his heart attack, stay with us as we uncover more secrets that enabled him to run marathons at age 70. These habits are easy to adopt and backed by science as keys to a long, healthy life. If you're ready to continue this incredible transformation, let's move on to habit number 3. The importance of social relationships. Habit number 3 is the importance of social relationships. John didn't just change his diet and start exercising. He also understood that social relationships are essential for longevity. Studies have shown that people who maintain positive, close relationships live longer and enjoy better health. Human connections make you feel supported and have a direct impact on your physical and mental health. After his heart attack, John realized that he had spent too much time alone. It wasn't because he wanted to. His daily routine and stress had led him to a point where he didn't realize how important it was to have others around. He decided to surround himself with people who brought him positive energy and motivated him to stay active. He started getting together with old friends and making new ones in his community. Every week, he joined a walking group or a book club and made sure to spend quality time with his family. This kept his mind active and provided him with emotional support through social interactions. According to research from the American Psychological Association, people with strong social networks are 20–30% more likely to live longer than those who isolate themselves. Remember that relationships aren't just for feeling accompanied. They also help your mental health. Laughter, mutual support, and a sense of belonging are powerful antidotes to stress and anxiety, which are often linked to an increased risk of heart disease. John learned that it wasn't just about taking care of his body, but also his emotional well-being. If you haven't gotten together with friends or family lately, I encourage you to do so. Small social interactions, whether over the phone, via video call, or in person, can have a big positive impact on your health. Best of all, this makes you feel good and can add years to your life. Habit number 4 is the importance of mental health and stress management. Another crucial factor for John was learning to manage stress. We all know that stress is an inevitable part of life. However, did you know that chronic stress can seriously affect your health, especially after age 60? After his heart attack, John realized that stress was one of the main factors that contributed to his health problem. Without realizing it, he had been carrying around a huge amount of daily tension that built up without his noticing. John decided to start using one of the most powerful stress management tools, meditation. At first, it wasn't easy. He thought meditation was weird or unnecessary. However, he began spending 10 minutes each morning doing guided meditation. What happened was surprising. Over time, he noticed a significant reduction in his anxiety level and in his feeling of being overwhelmed by everyday problems. Scientific research has shown that meditation and other relaxation techniques, such as deep breathing and yoga, can reduce the risk of heart disease and improve mental and emotional health. Harvard Medical School states that just a few minutes a day can significantly reduce cortisol levels, the stress hormone, and improve overall well-being. The key to all this is consistency. Like John, anyone can learn to calm their mind and reduce stress, regardless of their age or level of experience. If you haven't tried relaxation techniques yet, I encourage you to start small. You could start with 5 minutes of deep breathing in the morning or try a guided meditation app. The important thing is to give your body the space to relax and heal, not to do it perfectly. Habit number 5 is the power of restful sleep. After his heart attack, John learned that quality sleep is essential for recovery. Before his heart attack, John never paid much attention to his sleep. He got enough sleep, but it wasn't restful. After his heart attack, his doctor explained that restful sleep is essential for physical recovery, maintaining emotional balance, and strengthening the immune system. Instead of continuing with his usual routine, John decided to work on improving the quality of his sleep. He started creating a peaceful sleeping environment. He turned off all screens an hour before bedtime, kept his room dark and cool, and began practicing a relaxing bedtime routine. This routine included reading a book or taking a warm bath. These small changes made a big difference. Remember, sleep is one of the most powerful ways the body has to heal, rejuvenate, and regenerate. The National Sleep Foundation recommends that adults over 65 get 7-9 hours of sleep per night to maintain optimal health. Without enough sleep, your body can't repair cells, strengthen the heart, or process emotions. If you feel like your sleep isn't restful, I recommend implementing some of the changes John made. Turn off screens an hour before bedtime. Establish a consistent bedtime routine, and wake up at the same time each day. These simple steps will help you enjoy deeper, more restful sleep. Now that we've discussed these habits, reflect on them. Is there one you can start practicing today? No matter how small the changes are, every step counts and can improve your life more than you can imagine. If John's story has inspired you and you're ready to start improving your health in a simple, effective way, like this video, comment about your experience or your healthy habits, and subscribe to the channel for more useful content. It's time to transform your life. We've already discussed some fundamental habits that helped John survive a heart attack and transform his life. Even running marathons at age 70, we talked about how proper nutrition, moderate exercise, social relationships, stress management, and restful sleep can radically improve anyone's life, regardless of age. Now, I want to take it a step further and tell you about 2 other habits John adopted that were key to maintaining his vitality and energy levels, even after facing a challenge as daunting as a heart attack. Habit number 6 is the importance of keeping your mind active. After his heart attack, John realized that he needed to take care of his mind as well as his body. Mental health and cognition are just as important as physical health. John began doing activities that challenged his brain constantly. And you know what? You can do it too, regardless of your age. One of the most important factors in living a long, active life is exercising your brain. It's not just about memorizing names or playing mind games. It's about exposing yourself to new experiences, learning new things, and continuously developing your mind. John, for example, started learning to play the guitar. Although he had never been a musician before, he decided that turning 65 was the perfect time to learn something new. Whenever he encountered a challenging song, he reminded himself that the brain requires constant challenges to grow. And it worked. He not only learned to play, but also noticed that his memory and concentration improved. Continuous learning has been scientifically proven to prevent cognitive decline and memory loss. A University of California study found that people who engage in cognitively challenging activities have a 35% lower risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and other neurodegenerative disorders. In addition to playing the guitar, John joined a book club and began studying history, a subject in which he had always been interested, but had never had time to explore. Though simple, these activities were instrumental in keeping his brain young and active. You can do it too. It doesn't matter what you choose: reading, learning to paint, solving puzzles, or learning a new language. The important thing is to keep your mind active. Habit number 7 is gratitude and a positive mindset. This was perhaps the most powerful habit John adopted. After suffering a heart attack, many would have fallen into despair or fear. However, John chose to view life differently. He started practicing gratitude daily. Every morning before getting out of bed, he would name 3 things he was grateful for. This simple yet effective habit changed the way he viewed life. Instead of dwelling on what he had lost, he started appreciating what he had: his health, his friends, the opportunity to continue learning, and the ability to participate in activities he once thought were impossible. This shift in mindset had a profound impact on his emotional and physical well-being. Research shows that gratitude has very real effects on health. For example, a study published in the Journal of Psychosomatic Research found that people who regularly practice gratitude have lower stress levels, are less likely to suffer from heart disease, and report a better quality of life. Gratitude improves your heart health and lowers your blood pressure, making you feel better. John, like many others, discovered the enormous power of the mind. The way you think about yourself, your life, and your challenges directly impacts how your body responds to them. Instead of focusing on what he couldn't do, John focused on what he could do. That's what kept him motivated and moving forward. Now, as we come to the end of this video, I want you to think about this. Are you willing to make small, meaningful changes to improve your health and longevity? John didn't do anything impossible. He started with small steps and simple habits that any of us can adopt, regardless of age. Remember, it's not about waiting for things to change on their own. Your future is in your hands. No matter how old you are, it's never too late to start making life-transforming changes. Best of all, the benefits aren't just long-term. They're immediate. You'll have more energy, greater emotional well-being, better health, and the satisfaction of knowing that you're taking control of your life. If John's story has inspired you and motivated you to make some of these changes, I'd love to hear from you. Leave a comment below with the habits you're ready to try. Maybe you'd like to start practicing gratitude or incorporate more exercise into your day. I want to know. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the bell for more useful content on wellness and longevity. If you know someone who needs to hear this message, please share it with them. You might be the one to change their life today. Thank you for being here and for being part of this community. Here, we're talking about more than just living longer. We're talking about living better and with purpose. Here's to a long and energetic life at any age. This concludes our series on the habits that transformed John's life. The most important thing now is that it's your turn. See you in the next video, where we'll continue exploring how to take complete control of our health and well-being. Until next time.